My Victorian mansion on Pine Street had once been full of life. Now it was like a museum where I was the centerpiece, an old relic that everyone had forgotten about. 78 years is no joke. I was used to the creaking of my own joints, to the stiffness of my fingers in the morning, and to the way my heart sometimes went out of rhythm, like the old clock in the living room. But there was no way I could get used to the silence. That Sunday, sitting by the window, I thought about the past. Sundays used to be filled with voices, laughter, the clinking of dishes. My Roland would cut meat at the dinner table, the children would argue about some nonsense, and I would watch it all with a smile. A happy wife and mother. Now I sat in my chair by the window watching the sunspots slowly creep across the parquet. Eloise Pembroke, widow of an oil tycoon abandoned by her own children. Roland had died 12 years ago. A heart attack during a business trip to Denver. Sudden, ridiculous, unfair. He was 10 years older than me, but he always seemed so strong, so full of life. Unlike many men in his circle, he never cheated on me, never drank to excess, never lost a fortune at cards. His only passion was his work, investing in the oil fields. And, I wanted to think, myself. We met in Boston at a charity event. I was 22, fresh out of college and working in a library. Roland, already a successful businessman at the time, had donated a large sum of money for a new wing. He spotted me in the crowd and wouldn't leave my side all evening. "You have whiskey-colored eyes in the candlelight," he told me then. It was corny, but it sounded sincere when he said it. 6 months later, we were married, and a year later, we moved to Sheridan, Wyoming. Roland bought the house, huge with columns and stained glass windows, with 5 bedrooms and a library. "We're going to need a lot of room for kids," he said at the time. And children came. First Montgomery, 2 years later Beatrice. The picture on the mantel is the 4 of us on the porch of this house. Montgomery is 6 years old. Beatrice is 4. Roland holds his son's shoulder. I hug my daughter. All smiles. I didn't know then that I would be sitting here alone half a century later, remembering how it all went wrong. Beatrice left as soon as she graduated high school. "Mom, there's no future in this town," she said as she packed her suitcase. She went to UCLA, met some environmental activist, got married. Now she was living in Portland, raising 3 kids and running a nonprofit environmental organization. Called once a month, came for Christmas, not every year. Montgomery. Oh, Montgomery. My son, my firstborn, my weakness. I always spoiled him more than my daughter. Roland saw him as a successor. I adored him. He didn't even have to ask. I could read his wishes in his eyes. Better schools, summer camps, trips abroad. When he didn't get into Yale, Roland was disappointed, and I consoled him. Not everyone is born for academic success. When he dropped out of community college after his sophomore year, I defended him. He's just looking for himself. Roland insisted his son start working for his company. "Let him learn the value of money," he said. Montgomery lasted 3 months, then quit and decided to start his own business, a fashion boutique. I gave him money to rent a space and the first shipment of merchandise. The boutique went out of business in 6 months. Then there was an idea for a restaurant, then a real estate agency. Each time I supported him financially, each time it failed. After Roland died, Montgomery started coming around more often to see how I was doing. Or maybe he was just waiting for his inheritance. Roland left everything to me, on the condition that after my death, the fortune would be divided equally among the children. A clever man, he understood his son better than I did. 5 years ago, Montgomery married Odelia Crump. His second marriage, her third. A beautiful woman with cold eyes and impeccable manicures. She worked in luxury real estate, always dressed like the cover of a magazine, and looked at me like I was some old furniture that should have been thrown out a long time ago. With Odelia's arrival, my son's visits became even less frequent. Once every 2 or 3 months, for 15 to 20 minutes. "Just to check on you, Mom." Sometimes he called. More often he wrote messages. Short, formal ones. Last year he forgot my birthday. He remembered a week later, sent a bouquet and a $500 gift card to a store I'd never been to. The grandchildren, Beatrice's 2 sons and Montgomery's daughter from her first marriage, visited me only when they needed something. Money for school, for traveling, for a new car. I never said no. It was the only way I could see them. The clock in the living room struck 3 times. It was time to take my medication. I stood up slowly, leaning on my cane. My knees had been hurting more than usual lately, and I had shortness of breath even with a little exertion. Dr. Hayworth had said it was age, but I felt it wasn't just him. The pills were organized into containers, morning, afternoon, evening, a small pharmacy on the kitchen table. I downed a handful of colorful capsules with water and looked out the window. A neighbor, Eunice Thorpe, was tending to her garden. She was 65, widowed 3 years ago. Sometimes she came in for tea and told me about her daughter Evelyn, who worked as a nurse at Sheridan Hospital. Eunice was the only person, other than the servants, who came to my house regularly. The phone rang unexpectedly loud. I flinched, splashing the water. Montgomery's number. Mom? It's me. Hello, darling. How are you? I'm fine. Listen, I'm in the neighborhood. I thought I'd stop by for 5 minutes. Nearby is probably somewhere in the city. He lived in Sheridan, 20 minutes from my house, but he didn't visit me as often as his daughter from Portland. Of course you should come over. I'd be glad to. I really was glad. No matter what, he was my son. I hurried into the kitchen, asked Martha, my housekeeper, to make coffee and get the cookies Montgomery loved. Then I went into the bathroom, fixed my hair, put on some lipstick. I looked at my reflection wrinkles around my eyes and lips, gray hair in a neat bun. Roland always said I was aging beautifully. I wonder what he'd say now. Montgomery arrived 40 minutes later, impeccably dressed as always. Tweed jacket, expensive watch, fancy glasses. He kissed me on the cheek, a fleeting touch of dry lips, and made his way into the living room. How are you feeling, Mom? Fine, darling. How are you? How's Odelia? She's fine. We're planning a Mediterranean cruise next month. 2 weeks, 11 countries. He talked about the itinerary, the 5-star liner, the restaurants and excursions. I nodded and smiled. He didn't ask how my week had gone, what I'd been doing, didn't take any real interest in my health. Why had he come? It didn't take long for the answer to come. Mom, remember I told you about the new project? My partner and I are opening a boutique hotel in the mountains. It's going great, but we need a little extra capital to finish the renovations. That's it. Another business idea, another request for money. I listened to him describe the prospects, the potential profits, the return on investment. I've heard it all many times before. How much do you need, Montgomery? 100,000. This is the last installment, Mom, I promise. The hotel opens in 3 months, and in 6 months, I'll pay you back the money with interest. I stood up silently, went into my office, took out my checkbook. I wrote a check for $100,000. I knew that this money would probably disappear, just like all the previous investments. But I gave it to him anyway, because he was my son, because it was the only way I would ever see him again. Montgomery showered me with thanks, kissed me on the cheek again, promised to stop by next week. We both knew that wasn't going to happen. After he left, the house was even quieter. I returned to my chair by the window. The sunspots had already crept over the wall. The day was slipping toward evening. A sudden pain pierced my chest. Sharp, clenching, it spread to my left arm, to my neck. I gulped for air, tried to call out to Martha, but my voice wouldn't listen. Dark spots swam before my eyes. I fumbled for my cell phone in my robe pocket and dialed 911. Emergency services. What's your emergency? I'm in pain, my chest. I don't remember anything else. I woke up in the hospital to the monotonous beeping of monitors. Dr. Hayworth was standing at my bedside, going over some papers. Mrs. Pembroke, you suffered a massive heart attack. We've run some tests, and the results are not good. You need heart surgery, aortic-coronary bypass. I listened to him explain the clogged arteries, the risks, the urgency. My thoughts were jumbled, but one thing was clear. We need to call the kids. Beatrice answered right away. After hearing the news, she cried, Mommy, I'll come as soon as I can, but it won't be for another week at the earliest. Oliver has important exams. I can't leave him now. Oliver is her eldest son. I understood her priorities. Beatrice promised to call every day to check on my condition. Montgomery wasn't picking up. I left a message on his answering machine, then texted him. The reply came 2 hours later. Mom, just heard. How are you? Very busy right now. I'll come by tomorrow. He didn't come tomorrow or the day after. On the third day, I called him again. Montgomery, the doctors have scheduled the surgery for next week. I'm scared, son. Can you come over? Mom, I'm going through a very stressful time right now. This hotel is taking up all my time, and Odelia and I already paid for a cruise, and the tickets are non-refundable. A cruise? But the surgery. The surgery's in a week, and we leave the day after tomorrow. It's the best hospital in the state. You'll be fine. As I listened to his excuses, I felt something inside me snap. The last thread that tied me to the illusion that I still mattered to him. Of course, son, I understand. Get some rest. A nurse came into the room, a young woman with tired eyes and a kind face. Mrs. Pembroke, how are you feeling? Oh, are you crying? What's the matter? I wiped the tears away. Nothing, dear. It's just old age. The nurse sat down on the edge of the bed, took my hand. My name is Evelyn Thorpe. I'm your neighbor Eunice's daughter. She asked me to look after you. I recognized her now. The girl from the pictures in Eunice's house. I'm surprised we haven't met before. Thank you, Evelyn. Your mother is very kind to me. She's worried about you. She says you live alone in a big house. And your kids? My daughter's in Portland, and my son. Son's busy. Evelyn nodded understandingly. She saw people like me every day, old people forgotten by their children. I wasn't unique in my loneliness. In the evening, I watched the news on the small TV in the ward. A story about a tourist liner going on a Mediterranean cruise. Hundreds of happy passengers were walking up the gangway, Montgomery and Odelia among them, holding champagne glasses. The camera caught their faces for a moment, smiling, serene. They were not thinking about the woman who was lying in a hospital room preparing for heart surgery. The woman who had given life to one of them, who had given him everything she could. The morning before the surgery was unexpectedly sunny for Sheridan at this time of year. The rays shone through the blinds, forming golden streaks on the sterile hospital floor. I watched them from my bed, trying to distract myself from the intrusive thoughts of my upcoming surgery. Dr. Hayworth came in around 8 in the morning, holding my chart. He was tall, with sagebrush in his hair, and the tired eyes of a man who had seen too many deaths. How are you feeling today, Mrs. Pembroke? As a woman my age might feel on the eve of heart surgery, I tried to smile. Tolerable, doctor. I just want this to be over soon. He checked my vitals, listened to my heart and lungs, made some notes on my chart. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, he reminded me. The surgical team is the best in the state. Don't worry, everything will go well. A light knock on the door interrupted our conversation. It was Evelyn Thorpe, my neighbor's daughter. Good morning, she smiled first at me and then at the doctor. Am I interrupting? No, I'm done, Hayworth replied, heading for the exit. The nurses will make the final preparations later this evening. Evelyn walked into the room, holding a small basket covered with a napkin. Mom sent some homemade cookies. She set the basket on the bedside table. And the latest issue of the Sheridan Press. I know it's not very interesting in the hospital. Thank you, dear. I felt unexpected warmth from that simple gesture. Your mother was always very attentive. Evelyn sat down in the chair next to the bed. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense. Her cheekbones were too broad, her chin a little heavy. But her eyes radiated such sincerity, and her smile was so open, that she seemed much more attractive than many formerly beautiful women. How are you feeling? Mom's very worried. Tell her everything's fine, it's just, I hesitated, not knowing if I should share my fears with a complete stranger. Scared? Evelyn guessed. It's normal. I've worked here for 12 years and I've seen hundreds of patients before their operations. Even the bravest are afraid. It's not just the surgery, I admitted. I just feel alone. My daughter's in Portland, she can't make it. And my son. I didn't finish, but Evelyn seemed to understand. She squeezed my hand gently. I'll be here, Mrs. Pembroke. Before and after the operation. My shift just happens to fall on those days. Call me Eloise, please. Evelyn nodded and smiled. She made the hospital room seem less sterile and lifeless. Are you expecting a call? She asked, noticing my glance once again at the phone on the nightstand. From my son, I admitted. He promised to call before he left. He and his wife were going on a Mediterranean cruise tonight. Evelyn frowned, but didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I was well aware of how it looked from the outside. A son goes on a luxury trip while his mother prepares for heart surgery. He's very busy. I tried to justify it for some reason. He has a new business project. Of course, Evelyn said softly. But her eyes said, what excuse could possibly be enough? When Evelyn left, promising to return after lunch, I leaned back on the pillows and closed my eyes. Images of the past flashed before my eyes like frames from an old movie. Montgomery at 6 years old, with a shattered knee, crying in my arms. Mommy, kiss it so it doesn't hurt. And I kissed, and the pain did indeed recede. At least he believed it did. Montgomery at 12, winning the school swimming competition. His proud smile as he showed me his medal. I was at those competitions. I've always been to all of his performances. Montgomery at 16, wrecking his father's car. Scared. Guilty. Mom, don't tell Dad, please. And I didn't. Paid for the repairs out of my savings. Montgomery at 20, calling from college in the middle of the night. Mom, I'm in trouble. I need money. So I transferred money without asking what it was for. Then I found out it was gambling debts. Roland would be furious. Montgomery at 25, coming home with the news of his first marriage. Mom, this is Helena. We're in love. Helena is a fragile blonde with naive eyes. I gave them a wedding in the garden of our house, paid for a honeymoon in Hawaii. Montgomery, in his 30s, standing on the doorstep with a suitcase. Mom, we broke up. Can I stay with you? He lived for 8 months, me cooking his favorite meals, washing his shirts, listening to him complain about his ex-wife. Montgomery at 32, coming up with a new business idea. Mom, it's a win-win. Will you invest? And I invested over and over in every project he had, which invariably ended in failure. Montgomery at 38, introducing me to Odelia. Mom, this is serious. She's the one I've been looking for all my life. And I smiled, though I immediately sensed the falseness in her smile in return. I had given him everything: time, money, love. And what did I get in return? My phone vibrated, jolting me out of my memories. I grabbed it, my heart racing. Montgomery, finally. But it was a message from Beatrice. Mom, how are you? Oliver passed his exams. I'm booking a flight for next week. Hang in there, love you. I smiled and replied, I'm fine, darling. Don't worry, the surgery is simple. Give your grandchildren a kiss. Simple. I tried to convince my daughter of this, even though I knew that bypass surgery at my age carried serious risks. Dr. Hayworth was blunt. The odds are good, but there are no guarantees. The clock showed almost noon. Montgomery's plane was scheduled to leave at 2. I stared at my phone, waiting for a call. At least a text. Just something. There was a knock on the door. I looked up, expecting to see Evelyn, but it was Eunice, her mother. Eloise, darling. She came to the bed and put her arms around me. How did this happen? Evelyn only told me yesterday. Eunice was a little overweight, with a kind face and gray hair and a simple bundle. We'd been neighbors for 15 years, but we'd only really started talking to each other after our husbands died. Have a seat, Eunice. I pointed to a chair. Thanks for the cookies, and for asking Evelyn to look after me. It's nothing, she said. We're neighbors. Besides, Evelyn works at the hospital anyway. We talked about gardening, about the weather, about the new store that had opened downtown. Just the usual conversation between two old women. But I felt good about this simple human intimacy. Where are your children? Eunice finally asked. Is Beatrice still in Portland? Yes, she'll be here next week after her surgery, I answered. Her son has important exams. And Montgomery? I looked away. He has a trip planned with Odelia, a Mediterranean cruise. Eunice was silent. Then she put her hand gently on mine. Eloise, it's all right. I tried to smile. I understand. The tickets are paid for, everything is booked. And then what can he do? Just sit here and wait? To be by his mother's side before a major surgery, Eunice said quietly but firmly. To support her, to hold her hand. I didn't answer. What can I say? After Eunice left, I was alone again, waiting. The phone was silent. Time crept slowly towards 2 o'clock. At 2:30, they brought me lunch. Hospital food, tasteless and bland. I picked at my plate with my fork, but I didn't feel like eating. At 15 to 2, I couldn't stand it any longer and called Montgomery myself. Ringing, ringing. Finally, he answered. but it was so noisy I could barely make out the words. Mom? I'm at the airport. It's not very comfortable to talk. Montgomery, I just wanted to hear your voice before the surgery. Yeah, sure, he sounded impatient. Listen, we've already been announced for landing. You're gonna be fine. You're in good hands. I know, it's just. Mom, I'm sorry, I gotta go. Odelia was on her way out. Have a good rest, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. There was silence on the phone, then a sigh. Thank you, feel better. And a short beep. I stared at the phone, feeling empty inside. He didn't even tell me he loved me, didn't even say good luck with the surgery. 5 minutes later, a text came in. I opened it with hope. Maybe he'd found the right words after all. Handle your illness yourself, bye. I reread those words several times, unable to believe my eyes. Cold, cruel, thrown in between. As if I were not a mother, but an annoying acquaintance disturbing his rest. At that moment, something broke inside me. The last thread that connected me to my illusions of a son who, somewhere deep inside, still loved his mother. The thread that I had clung to so desperately all these years. I looked out the window at the passing clouds and remembered everything I had done for him. College in eastern Wyoming, $30,000 a year. 4 years. First failed business, $50,000. Marriage to Helena, $20,000. Divorce from Helena, $10,000 to the lawyers. Second failed business, $70,000. Third failed business, $90,000. Debts I paid off in secret from Roland, cars I bought him, apartments I paid off. And it wasn't just the money. How many times did I cancel my plans because he needed help? How many times did I sit up nights with him, listening to his problems? How many times had I sided with him in arguments with Roland, even when I knew my husband was right? Deal with your illness yourself, bye. 8 words that were the final straw. Evelyn returned in the afternoon as promised. She immediately noticed the change in my mood. Is something wrong, Eloise? You look upset. I silently showed her a message from my son. She read it and handed the phone back with her lips pressed together. That's it, was all she said. That's how it is, I echoed. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Evelyn asked cautiously, What are you going to do? What can I do? I shrugged. He's my son. I love him no matter what. But that doesn't mean you should let him treat you like that, Evelyn said softly. She was right. Loving doesn't mean you have to be a doormat to wipe your feet on. I'd lived a long life, raised 2 children, buried a husband. I deserved respect, especially from my own son. You know, I said after a pause, you're right. There is something I can do. I picked up my phone and found a number I hadn't dialed in years. Who are you calling? Evelyn asked. Theodore Garland. He was a friend of my husband's and still handles our family affairs. And he's an excellent notary. Evelyn raised her eyebrows in surprise, but said nothing. Theodore answered after the third beep. His voice sounded exactly as I remembered it. A low, low voice with a slight huskiness. Theodore Garland speaking. Theodore, this is Eloise Pembroke. I need to change my will. It's urgent. The night before the operation, I hardly slept at all. I lay in a half-darkened room, listening to the muffled sounds of the hospital, the footsteps of nurses in the corridor, the distant beeping of monitors, random voices. I thought about the conversation I'd had with Theodore Garland. When I'd called him yesterday, he'd been confused at first. Eloise, I heard about your surgery. You should be thinking about your health right now, not legal technicalities, he said. But I insisted. Asked him to come to the hospital with the paperwork. If something happens to me tomorrow, I want to make sure that my condition is distributed in a way I think is fair, I explained. Theodore agreed reluctantly. He promised to come in the morning before the operation. At 5 in the morning, Evelyn entered the room. Her shift had just started, but she came straight to see me. Are you awake? She asked, noticing that my eyes were open. I can't, I admitted. Too many thoughts. Any. She walked over to the bed, adjusted my pillows, checked my IV. It's normal to be nervous before surgery, she said. But it's going to be okay, Eloise. Dr. Hayworth is the best heart surgeon in the state, and I'll be assisting him. You'll be in the OR? That was unexpectedly good news. Yes, she smiled. I specialize in cardiology, and I've asked to be on your operating team. I felt a warm wave of gratitude toward this woman who had been a complete stranger to me 2 days ago. She was more caring than my own son. Thank you, Evelyn, was all I could say. She nodded, understanding all the unspoken words. At 7 o'clock, the pre-operative procedures began. Blood pressure, temperature, tests. I mechanically followed all the instructions of the medical staff, signed some forms, answered the anesthesiologist's questions. My thoughts were far away. At 8:30, there was a knock on the ward. It was Theodore Garland, a tall, thin man with a neat gray beard and shrewd blue eyes. In spite of his age, he was about 70. He stood erect and moved briskly. Eloise. He took my hand and squeezed it lightly. Are you sure you want to do this now? Absolutely, I answered firmly. Sit down, Theodore. We have a lot to talk about, and we don't have much time. He sat down beside the bed and pulled a file from his briefcase. I brought a copy of your current will, he said. I'll remind you of the main points. The house and all property are divided equally between Montgomery and Beatrice upon your death. Educational funds are allocated to the grandchildren. We made this will after Roland died 12 years ago. I nodded. That's right, and I want to change it completely. Theodore took a deep breath. Eloise, you know that I have been Roland's friend for many years. He has entrusted me with the care of your family affairs. And as a friend, I have to ask, have you thought carefully? Changing your will on the eve of a major surgery might seem like an impulsive decision. I looked him straight in the eye. Theodore, I've been thinking about this for the last 12 years. I just ran out of patience yesterday. I told him about Montgomery's behavior, about his message. I showed him the text on my phone. Theodore's face hardened. I understand, he said briefly. What do you want to change? Everything. I straightened up on the pillows. I want to leave the house and most of the inheritance to Evelyn Thorpe. Theodore raised his eyebrows in surprise. Your neighbor's daughter? Are you sure? Absolutely. She's the only person besides you who's shown genuine concern for me in recent days. She'll be in the OR today holding my life in her hands. Meanwhile, my son will be sipping cocktails on a cruise ship. Theodore rubbed his chin thoughtfully. And Beatrice? She couldn't come because of her son's exams. That's a good reason. I nodded. To Beatrice, I will leave a small sum and the collection of antique books she has always loved. To her children, 10,000 each. To Montgomery's daughter from her first marriage, 10,000 too. These are token sums, I know, but better than nothing. And Montgomery? Theodore asked cautiously. I felt my lips stretch into an unhappy smile. To him and Odelia, I leave our family crypt in Mountain View Cemetery. They're so anxious to bury me soon. Let them have at least that. Theodore couldn't hold back a short laugh. Eloise, you've always been a woman of character. Roland admired that about you. Roland spoiled our son as much as I did, I sighed. Just in his own way, always getting him out of trouble, always giving him a second chance. Maybe we're both to blame for the way he's grown up. Theodore began drafting a new document right there in the hospital room. He worked quickly and concentrated, occasionally asking clarifying questions. I answered clearly and confidently. There was no doubt, just cold determination. When the draft was ready, Theodore let me read it. I scrutinized every paragraph, every wording. Everything was exactly as I wanted it to be. Eloise, Theodore said seriously when I had finished reading, do you realize that Montgomery will almost certainly contest this will? He might claim that you were incapacitated by preoperative stress or medication. Let him try, I shrugged. You have his text from yesterday. You have the medical staff's testimony about my lucidity. You have his long history of financial abuse. We'll win any trial. Theodore nodded. I'll take care of everything. I'll go to the nursing station now and ask 2 nurses to witness the signing. It's standard procedure. When he left, I leaned back on the pillows and closed my eyes. A strange calmness swept over me. For the first time in years, I felt in control of the situation, not adrift. 10 minutes later, Theodore returned with 2 nurses. One of them, an older woman with kind eyes, introduced herself as Martha Jenkins, the head nurse of the ward. The second was younger, with a serious expression on her face. Her name was Sarah Chen. Theodore explained the procedure to them. They had to certify that I was of sound mind and that I was signing the document voluntarily. Both of them nodded. I sat up in bed. Theodore placed the will in front of me and held out a pen. For a moment, I stared at the document that would change my family's future. Then I resolutely signed each page. The nurses signed as witnesses. Theodore sealed the document with his notary seal. "Everything is official," he said, tucking the papers into his briefcase. "I'll file the papers with the court today." "Thank you, Theodore." I squeezed his hand. "And one more favor. Don't tell Evelyn about my decision. Not now. I'll tell her myself. Afterward." He nodded understandingly. "Of course. Good luck today, Eloise. I'll be waiting for good news." After he left, I was alone. The time before the operation melted away. At 9 o'clock, a team of nurses came to prepare me for transfer to the operating room. Evelyn was among them. "Everything is ready, Eloise," she said as she helped me onto the gurney. "Don't worry, we'll take good care of you." I squeezed her hand. "I know, darling. I trust you." The operating room was cold and bright. Lots of instruments, unfamiliar faces and masks. Dr. Hayworth gave me a brief nod, his eyes above the mask focused and calm. The anesthesiologist hooked up an IV to my arm. "Count backwards from 10, Mrs. Pembroke," he said. I started counting. 10, 9, 8. The last thing I saw before I fell into darkness were Evelyn's eyes. Kind, caring, reliable. I woke up in the intensive care unit. My throat was sore from the intubation tube, my chest hurt, my head was foggy. Through the translucent veil, I saw a blurry figure leaning over the bed. "Eloise, can you hear me?" Evelyn's voice came through the ringing in my ears. I tried to nod, but my body wouldn't listen. "Everything went well," Evelyn continued. "The operation was a success. You were very strong. I fell back into darkness. The next few days were an endless stream of medical procedures, measurements, injections, and examinations. Gradually, my consciousness cleared and the pain receded. I began to perceive the world around me more clearly. On the third day after the operation, I was moved from intensive care to a regular ward. Evelyn came in every day, despite her busy schedule. She told me hospital news, brought me magazines, and helped me with the exercises the doctor had prescribed. "You're recovering faster than many patients half your age," she said with a smile on the 5th day. "Dr. Hayworth is very pleased." "I'm motivated," I replied. "I want to get home as soon as possible." My phone was silent. No calls, no messages from Montgomery. Beatrice called every day promising to come next week. Eunice, a neighbor, stopped by every other day, bringing home-cooked meals that Evelyn secretly heated for me in the staff lounge. On the 7th day after the operation, Theodore came into the room. He brought a bouquet of white lilies and a box of chocolates. "You look better," he said, kissing me on the cheek. "Your complexion isn't so earthy anymore." "I always knew I could count on you for compliments," I grinned. He laughed and sat down next to the bed. "How are you feeling, seriously?" "Better every day." I lifted myself up gingerly on the pillows. "My chest is still sore, but that's normal. The doctor says the recovery is going well." Theodore nodded, then lowered his voice. "Eloise, there's something I need to tell you. The news of your new will." It had already reached Montgomery. I tensed up. "How is that possible? Had you told someone?" "Of course not," he shook his head. "But remember the nurse, Sarah Chen, who was a witness? Turns out her husband works for a law firm that sometimes advises Odelia's company. Gossip travels fast in a small town." I sighed. Sheridan, for all its virtues, was still a place where everyone knew too much about each other. "And how did my son react?" Theodore hesitated. "He didn't take the news very well. Called me yesterday, demanding an explanation. I told him I couldn't discuss confidential client matters. He was furious, to say the least. I imagine Montgomery yelling into the phone, and his face, usually so coldly contemplative, contorted with rage. Strangely, I felt no gloating or triumph, just tiredness." "Did he threaten to sue?" I asked. "Not yet," Theodore replied. "But he said he was returning from the cruise immediately. He and Odelia should fly in tomorrow." I nodded. "Tomorrow, then. Well, I was ready for this meeting. I've been ready for a long time." "Thanks for the heads up, Theodore." "You haven't changed your mind?" he asked cautiously. "It's not too late to make changes." I shook my head. "No, I'm absolutely sure of my decision." When Theodore left, I sat looking out the window at the gray autumn sky for a long time. My thoughts flowed slowly and calmly. I felt no fear of my upcoming meeting with my son, only sadness, a deep, long-standing sadness for that boy whom I had once loved more than anything else in the world and who had long ago turned into a stranger. In the evening, Evelyn stopped by to check my vitals before going home. She noticed the bouquet of lilies. "Beautiful flowers," she said. "From your notary friend?" "Yes," I smiled. Theodore was always attentive. Evelyn sat down on the edge of the bed. "Eloise, may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, dear." "You and Mr. Garland, is there something going on between you?" I laughed for the first time in a long time, heartily and sincerely. "God, no. Theodore was my husband's best friend. They went to college together, started a business together. He's like a brother to me." Evelyn was embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's all right." I patted her hand. "The thought amuses me. Theodore is certainly a decent man, though." We chatted some more and Evelyn left. I was left alone with thoughts of tomorrow, how Montgomery would react when he saw me, about what I would say to him. I closed my eyes and pictured his face, the features of Roland, but without his kindness and honesty, eyes that had once shone with childlike joy, but now were nothing but greed. And suddenly I realized that I no longer feared his anger. I'm not afraid of his accusations, not afraid of his attempts to manipulate me. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. My heart, literally and figuratively, had been given a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it on old fears and attachments. I knew tomorrow would be a tough day, but I also knew I could handle it, because I was finally doing what I should have done a long time ago, putting my value above other people's expectations. With that thought, I drifted into a restful, healing sleep. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have nightmares. I awoke to a soft knock on the door. The clock on my bedside table read 9 in the morning. Too early for rounds, too late for morning routines. I fixed my hair and pulled up the blanket. "Come in." The door opened and I froze. Montgomery stood on the threshold. He looked unfamiliar, wrinkled, tired, with stubble on his cheeks. The tan he'd gotten over the few days of the cruise only emphasized the dark circles under his eyes. In his hands, he held a huge bouquet, a lush, screaming combination of lilies, roses, and orchids, as inappropriate and ostentatious as his sudden concern. "Mom," he stepped into the room trying to smile. "How are you?" "Better than expected." I straightened up on the pillows. "The doctors say the recovery is going well." He set the bouquet on the table, not knowing what to do next. I waited, not helping him start a conversation. Finally, he awkwardly leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. "I was so worried," he said. "As soon as I found out the surgery was more serious than you said, I decided to come back." We both knew that was a lie. He didn't come back because of the surgery, he came back because of the will. But I nodded, pretending to believe it. "That's very nice of you. How's Odelia? She's back too?" "Yeah, but she stayed at the hotel. There was a terrible bump on the boat. She got seasick. She said to tell you she'll come back later." Another lie. Odelia never got seasick. She just didn't want to waste time with an old woman in the hospital until she was sure she had a chance to regain control of her inheritance. Montgomery took a seat in the chair by the bed, carefully tucking my blanket in. The theatricality of his gestures was almost comical. "Do you need anything? Maybe some fruit? Or a book?" "Thank you, I have everything." I pointed to the bedside table, where a basket of fruit from Eunice and a stack of books Evelyn had brought. My son visibly tensed when he saw the gifts. He was used to being the only one to give or take anything. "Who brought these?" he asked, with feigned nonchalance. "Eunice's neighbor and her daughter Evelyn. She works here as a nurse and takes great care of me." Montgomery frowned. "The neighbor's daughter? I didn't know you two were close." "A lot changed while you were on the cruise," I replied calmly. There was an awkward pause. Montgomery fidgeted in his chair. "Mom, I've heard some strange rumors." "What kind of rumors?" I looked right at him. "About your will. They say you changed it before the operation. Is that true?" This was the moment of truth. I took a deep breath. "Yes, it's true." His face trembled, but he quickly pulled himself together. "But why? I don't understand. I mean, we had it all worked out." "You see, Montgomery," I said softly but firmly, "the heart surgery made me think about a lot of things. about what's really important, about who really cares about me, about who I can trust with the fruits of your father's life's labor. Montgomery turned pale. Are you implying that I don't care about you? That's not fair, Mom. I have a business, a family, obligations. I can't be around 24 hours a day. I'm not asking for 24 hours, I said. I only asked for a few days when I was preparing for an operation that could have been my last. But the tickets were non-refundable, he exclaimed. And then he shivered when he realized how that sounded. Of course, I nodded. The tickets are more important. The door opened and Evelyn came in with a tray of medicine. She stopped in surprise when she saw Montgomery. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had a visitor, she said to me. I'll come back later. It's all right, Evelyn, I smiled at her. This is my son, Montgomery. Montgomery, this is Evelyn Thorpe, the one I was telling you about. My son stood up with a friendly smile on his face. It's a pleasure, Miss Thorpe. Thank you for taking care of my mother. I would have loved to, but unfortunately I was away on urgent business. Evelyn nodded, her face remaining neutral. I understand. Work comes first. Something in her tone made Montgomery wary. He sat down again, watching carefully as Evelyn helped me take my medication, checked my IV, took my blood pressure. Her movements were confident and gentle. It's all right, Eloise, she said as she wrote down the readings on the chart. Her blood pressure is normal, no fever. Dr. Hayworth will be in this afternoon. Thank you, dear. I squeezed her hand. How late are you in today? 8 o'clock tonight, she said. But I can stop by later if I need anything. Montgomery watched our conversation with ill-concealed irritation. When Evelyn left, he immediately turned to me. She calls you by your first name, and you let her? I asked her to, I shrugged. It makes me feel more comfortable. How long have you two become close? Ever since you went on that cruise and I ended up in the hospital with the prospect of open-heart surgery. Montgomery cringed. Are you still mad about that? I told you I didn't have a choice. Everyone always has a choice, son, I said softly. You made yours. I made mine. He was silent, tapping his fingers on the armrest. I could see the gears turning in his head, picking out new tactics. Look, he finally said, taking my hand in his. I know I haven't been the perfect son. Maybe sometimes I've been too busy doing my own thing. But I've always loved you, you know that. And I'm here now, ready to help in any way I can. Odelia and I don't think you should go back to that big empty house by yourself. Why don't you move in with us while you rebuild? I could barely contain my laughter. It was absurd to imagine me in Odelia's house, where every piece of furniture cost as much as a nice car, and where I would surely be put in the farthest room. Thank you for the offer, I said politely. But I'm going back to my house. Eunice and Evelyn will visit me, and I've hired a nurse for the first time. Montgomery's face stretched. A nurse? But that's expensive. I can afford it, I replied calmly. But I could help, he exclaimed. Why spend the money when I'm willing to? You're busy, Montgomery, I interrupted. You have a business, a family, obligations. Remember? He bit his lip, realizing he'd fallen into his own trap. Mom, let's be honest, he said after a pause. What exactly did you change in the will? That's privileged information, I smiled. If you're so interested, you can ask Theodore. Though I don't think he would discuss my affairs with you without my permission. But I am your son! Montgomery was indignant. I have a right to know! Actually, you don't, I said softly. The will is my personal document. You will know its contents when the time comes. Montgomery opened his mouth to say something, but at that moment his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. I'm sorry, I have to take this. It's Odelia. He stepped out into the hallway covering the door, but hospital doors are thin, and his voice grew louder on emotion. I heard bits of conversation. No, not yet. She's not talking, trying to be nice, but she's like a flint. Some nurse, the neighbor's daughter. I don't know, it seems like they're getting close. Yes, I realize how much the house costs. Don't yell at me, I'm doing my best. Then his voice became quieter. He must have moved on. 5 minutes later, Montgomery returned, smiling strainedly. Odelia is worried, he said. She sends her love and best wishes. How nice, I smiled. Tell her I appreciate her concern, and tell her that the walls in hospitals are usually very thin. Montgomery paled. Did you hear that? Enough to realize how concerned you and your wife are about my health, not the value of my house. There was a heavy pause. Montgomery was clearly struggling with himself, not knowing whether to continue the pretense or move on to a frank conversation. Mom, you misunderstood, he said at last. Of course we care about your health. It's just that Odelia is a practical person. She's thinking of the future. A future without me, I finished for him. That's not what I meant. I looked at my son, a handsome man with perfect hair and an expensive watch. There was panic on his face, not because I might think badly of him, but because he might lose his inheritance. Montgomery, I said quietly, how much money have I given you in the last 10 years? He blinked in surprise. What? I haven't counted. I have, I interrupted. $1,320,000 for your business projects, for paying off your loans, for the down payment on your house, for your wedding to Odelia. $1,320,000. Montgomery swallowed. I was going to pay it back. When? I asked. When exactly were you going to pay back a dime of that money? He was silent, unable to find an answer. I never asked you to give that money back, I continued, because you're my son, and I wanted you to have the best. But you know what always surprised me? You never said thank you. You never showed any gratitude. You took my help for granted, like I was an ATM machine instead of a mother. It's not fair, he said quietly. I'm grateful for everything. Then why didn't you come when I was getting ready for surgery? Why did you send that text? Handle your illness yourself, bye. Remember? Montgomery turned even paler. That's not what I meant. I was stressed. I was in a hurry to get on a plane. Stressed? I laughed softly. Do you know what real stress is? It's when you're lying on an operating table and your heart is stopped so the surgeon can work. It's when you don't know if you're going to wake up again. It's when your only son would rather cruise the Mediterranean than hold your hand in what may be the last minutes of your life. Silence hung in the chamber. Montgomery stared at the floor, unable to find the words. I'm not mad at you, I said softly. I just finally saw the truth, and I made a decision based on that truth. What decision? He looked up. You'll find out in due time, I smiled weakly. Right now, if you don't mind, I'd like to rest. It's a long road to recovery. Montgomery stood up, confused and depressed. I'll come back tomorrow, he said. Maybe I'll bring your favorite cakes from that French pastry shop. As you wish, I said. Just check with Evelyn first to see what I can eat after the operation. He nodded and walked out, slouching more than usual. When the door closed, I took a deep breath. This conversation had exhausted me more than all the medical procedures, but I felt strangely satisfied. For the first time in years, I had told my son the truth. No sugarcoating, no self-deception. After lunch, Dr. Hayworth came in. He examined me, checked my stitches, listened to my heart and lungs. Excellent results, Mrs. Pembroke, he said. If you keep this up, we should be able to discharge you in 3 or 4 days. Thank you, doctor, I smiled. That's good news. After he left, Evelyn came in with tea and the latest issue of the magazine. Has your son left already? She asked, helping me to sit up higher. Yes, I nodded. But he promised to be back tomorrow. Evelyn paused, obviously searching for words. He seems caring. I laughed softly. He does, yes, when it's to his advantage. Evelyn lowered her eyes in embarrassment. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry. It's all right. I touched her arm. You've become closer to me than many relatives these days. You deserve to know the truth. That evening, as I was about to go to bed, there was another knock at the door. This time it was Theodore, pale and worried. Eloise, I'm sorry I'm late, he said, coming into the room. But I must tell you what happened. I sat up in bed. What happened? Your son came to my office. Theodore sighed heavily. First, he tried to convince me that you were out of your mind when you signed the new will. When I reminded him that I had written medical evidence that you were sane, he offered me money. A bribe? I wasn't even surprised. Yes, Theodore nodded. $100,000 if I lose the new document and restore the old one. I, of course, refused and asked him to leave the office. He started yelling, threatening to sue. I had to call security. I covered my eyes. So much for the attempt to bribe the notary that was in the plan. Montgomery was even more predictable than I thought. I'm sorry you had to go through that, Theodore, I said. You did the right thing. Eloise, Theodore said seriously, I must warn you. Your son will not stop. He will look for any way to contest the will. Let him try, I smiled calmly. You and I did everything according to the law, and besides, I'm not dead yet. I have hopefully many years ahead of me to watch my son try to earn my forgiveness. Theodore looked at me carefully. You've changed, Eloise. Tougher, tougher. Not tougher. I shook my head. I just stopped turning a blind eye to the truth. You know, when your heart stops during surgery, you see things differently. It's like the veil falls away from your eyes. Theodore squeezed my hand. No matter what happens, I'm on your side. Always. After he left, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I thought about Montgomery, about his desperate attempts to regain control of the situation, how quickly the mask of the caring son fell off when he realized he might lose his inheritance. Funny, but I felt no anger or resentment, just a calm determination to see it through. Montgomery should have realized that money isn't the most important thing in life. Real wealth is trust, caring, loyalty. Things you can't buy, but you can earn. 3 months flew by. Winter blanketed Sheridan in snow, the days grew shorter, and I spent my evenings by the fireplace in my living room, watching the whimsical play of the flames. My recovery was going well. Dr. Hayworth said I was recovering better than many patients half my age. My strength was returning gradually, and although I was still using a cane, I was no longer breathless when I climbed stairs. It's amazing how life changes. I saw my son more often in those 3 months than I had in the previous 3 years. Montgomery and Odelia visited me every weekend, always with gifts of exquisite sweets from a French patisserie, rare teas, silk shawls, exotic flowers. They invited me to dinners at the best restaurants in Sheridan, offered to take me to their country house for the weekend, invited me to the theater and concerts. That Sunday, as usual, they arrived in time for lunch. Odelia was dressed in an elegant ivory cashmere suit that accentuated her slender figure and California tan. Montgomery looked as impeccable as ever. Gray suit, stylish tie, polished shoes. They brought a box of expensive Belgian chocolates and a bouquet of white roses. Mom, you look beautiful. Montgomery kissed me on the cheek. Just like before. Thank you, darling, I smiled. Today was a really good day. We were thinking about going to Denver next weekend, Odelia said, taking off her coat. There's a terrific Impressionist exhibit opening there. You love Monet, don't you, Eloise? I hid a smile. Before the operation, Odelia hadn't even known I was interested in art. Now she suddenly remembered all my preferences. I love it, I nodded. But I already have plans for next weekend. Evelyn invited me to her mother's birthday party. Odelia's face tensed slightly, but she quickly restored her smile. That's a shame. Maybe in 2 weeks? We'll see, I said uncertainly. Come into the dining room. Martha's already set the table. Montgomery helped me up from the chair, gently supporting me under the elbow. This new, caring son was still an unfamiliar sight to me. Over lunch, the conversation flowed leisurely, about the weather, about the news in town, about the latest movie they'd seen. Not a word about money, not a word about inheritance. But I could feel the topic hanging in the air, unspoken but palpable. How's your hotel, Montgomery? I asked when Martha brought dessert. The one in the mountains. Last time you told me the opening had been postponed. My son wrinkled his nose a little. There have been some complications with the contractor, but we're working it out. I think everything will be ready by spring. I'm sure everything will work out, I smiled encouragingly. By the way, I talked to Theodore last week. They were discussing my financial affairs. Montgomery and Odelia instantly tensed, though they tried not to show it. Yes? My son asked as casually as possible. What does he say? He says my fortune has grown over the past few months. The investments your father made have been very successful, especially those technology stocks. Odelia stepped forward. Really? I always said Roland was an investment genius. His business acumen was passed on to Montgomery, you know. I held back a chuckle. My husband never thought of our son as a businessman. On the contrary, he worried that Montgomery lacked either business acumen or work ethic. Of course, I agreed. In any case, Theodore suggested that I revise some aspects of my will to reflect my changed circumstances. There was a tense silence in the room. Montgomery and Odelia exchanged quick glances. What aspects? My son asked cautiously. Oh, various details. I waved my hand nonchalantly. You know, a lot has changed in the last few months. I've gotten to know some people better, reevaluated my relationships with others. There are new circumstances to consider. Of course, Mom, Montgomery said quickly. You have to do what you think is right. We fully support whatever decision you make, Odelia added with a luscious smile. I sipped my tea slowly, watching them. It had become my little Sunday pastime to hint at possible changes in the will and see how they reacted. Perhaps it was a little cruel, but after all these years I deserved this little revenge. After dessert, Montgomery volunteered to help me with my medications. He knew exactly what pills I should take and when, further proof of his newfound caring nature. Mom, he began when we were alone in the kitchen, I've been meaning to ask. You know I've changed, don't you? I've realized my mistakes. The way I acted before your surgery, it's unforgivable, but I really want to make it right. I looked at my son carefully. There was sincerity, or a very good imitation of sincerity, in his eyes. Over the years, he's become a master manipulator. I know you're trying, Montgomery, I said softly. And I appreciate it. Time will tell how profound these changes are. He nodded, clearly disappointed by my restrained response. I just want you to know that I love you, and I'm sorry it took major surgery for me to realize that. I patted his arm. Better late than never, son. When they left, I sank into my favorite chair by the window with relief. These visits were wearing me out. The constant tension, the need to follow every word, watch every gesture they made. But I wasn't going to give up. This was a game I intended to win. Around 5 in the evening, Evelyn arrived. She stopped by almost every day after work, sometimes just for a cup of tea, sometimes staying for dinner. Unlike the visits of Montgomery and Odelia, her presence did not tire me. On the contrary, it energized me. How was the family visit? She asked, taking off her coat. The usual, I grinned. A lot of feigned concern, a lot of unspoken questions about money. Evelyn shook her head. I can't understand how you can treat your own mother like that. It's my own fault, I sighed. I spoiled him too much, indulged him too much. Roland and I had raised a selfish man who was used to getting what he wanted without effort. Evelyn sat down beside me. But you could have just cut him off from the inheritance. Why this game, I wondered. Really, why? Revenge? A teachable moment? Or something else? I guess I wanted to believe that he could still change, I finally answered. That somewhere deep inside that calculating man, there's still the boy I once loved more than anything in the world. And if there's even the slightest chance of getting him back, I must try. Evelyn nodded understandingly and squeezed my hand. The following Friday, I finally made up my mind. I called Theodore and asked him to come on Sunday. Then I called Beatrice in Portland. Darling, could you come this Sunday? I asked. And bring the children if they can. There's an important family matter I want to discuss. Is something wrong, Mom? There was concern in my daughter's voice. Nothing bad, I reassured her. I just wanted to clear up a few things. Beatrice promised to come, though she sounded puzzled. Then I called Montgomery, inviting him over with Odelia and his daughter from my first marriage. He was immediately wary. What's this family gathering, Mom? What are we talking about? You'll see on Sunday, I replied cryptically. Just show up at 2 o'clock. Finally, I called Eunice and Evelyn, inviting them too. To Evelyn's surprised question as to why I was inviting them to a family gathering, I simply replied, because you are my family too. At least that's how you act. Sunday came frosty and clear. I had Martha prepare some snacks and set up the living room. I put on my best dress, a dark blue one with a pearl brooch that Roland had once given me. I combed my hair and put on my lipstick. It was the big day, and I wanted to look my best. First to arrive were Eunice and Evelyn, precise as always. Then Theodore with a briefcase full of documents. Soon Beatrice appeared with her husband and 2 teenage sons. She hugged me, scrutinizing my face. You look good, Mom, she said. Healthier than when I came here after your surgery. I feel better every day, I smiled. Montgomery and Odelia were the last to arrive, as usual. With them was Pearl, Montgomery's daughter from his first marriage, a tall, serious girl of 19 who looked strikingly like her grandfather. When everyone was seated in the parlor, there was an awkward silence. My family eyed Evelyn and Eunice suspiciously, trying to figure out why they were here. Theodore sat a little to the side, calm and collected. Thank you all for coming, I began. I've gathered you here to bring clarity to a matter that I know many of you are concerned about, the matter of my inheritance. Montgomery and Odelia exchanged quick glances. Beatrice frowned. Her husband looked embarrassed and her sons looked frankly bored. Pearl watched everyone with mild interest. As you know, after my surgery, I revised my will, I continued. This has caused a certain amount of anxiety among some of the family. I looked at Montgomery. He was sitting up straight, his face tense. I've given it a lot of thought over the last 3 months, I said, and I've decided to make changes again. Theodore, if you would be so kind. The notary opened his briefcase and took out some documents. First, I said, I would like to inform you that I have already transferred part of my fortune to Evelyn Thorpe's account, as a thank you for her care and support during the most difficult period of my life. Evelyn literally held my heart in her hands during the operation, and I trust her unconditionally. Montgomery turned pale. Odelia froze with a strained smile. How much? My son asked sharply. $500,000, I replied calmly. About the same amount I gave you for your last business project. Evelyn looked shocked. Eloise, I can't accept. You can and you will, I said firmly. The money has already been transferred. It's my gift, and I don't want to hear any objections. Evelyn was silent, but there were tears of gratitude in her eyes. Secondly, I continued, I have divided a portion of the inheritance among my grandchildren directly. Each of you, I looked at Beatrice's sons and Pearl, will receive $250,000 when you reach the age of 25. This money will be held in a trust to be administered by Theodore. Neither your parents nor anyone else will have access to these funds. The teenagers perked up. Pearl blinked in surprise. Thank you, grandmother, she said quietly. As for the bulk of my fortune, including this house, I paused. Everyone held their breath. I have decided to do something unusual. These assets will be placed in a special trust that I will manage during my lifetime. Each year on my birthday, I will decide how to distribute the income from these assets based on how my family members have behaved during the year. Who showed genuine concern, who was there for me not only in body but also in spirit, who showed themselves to be trustworthy. There was a shocked silence in the room. After my death, I continued, the trust will be administered by a board that will include Theodore, Evelyn, and another person I will appoint later. They will distribute the proceeds of my estate according to criteria I will leave in a sealed letter. Montgomery looked like he'd been punched. You're turning us into competing heirs? He squeezed out. I'm giving you an incentive to be the best versions of yourselves, I corrected. To take care of others not for profit, but because it's the right thing to do. And yes, I will watch you, evaluate you, draw conclusions. Let that be my last entertainment. I couldn't hold back a chuckle when I saw the look on his face. That's not fair, Odelia exclaimed, unable to stand it. We're not children to be controlled like this. No, we're not, I agreed. Children are usually more sincere in their feelings, and more grateful for what they have. Beatrice was silent, pondering what she had heard. Are you sure this is what you want, Mother? She finally asked. It could create a lot of tension in the family. There is already tension, dear, I replied softly. It's just that now it's come to the surface, and yes, I'm absolutely sure. Theodore, hand out copies of the documents, please. The notary handed everyone a copy of the new will. Montgomery frantically flipped through the pages as if looking for a loophole. Odelia sat stone-faced. It's all formalized and certified, Theodore said. It's virtually impossible to dispute, given all the medical evidence of Mrs. Pembroke's sanity and the lack of pressure from anyone else. I need to think, Montgomery said abruptly, standing up. Come along, Odelia Pearl. Of course, dear. I nodded quietly. Take as long as you need to think. You'll have a whole year until my next birthday, when I'll make my first decision on income distribution. Montgomery froze, looking at me with a mixture of fury and disbelief. Then he turned abruptly and walked out. Odelia followed him, giving me a murderous look. Pearl hesitated, came over to me, hugged me awkwardly, and whispered, I still love you, Grandma. Not because of the money. Those simple words touched me more than she could have imagined. After they left, Beatrice sat down next to me. You're not just having fun, are you, Mom? You have a plan. I smiled. My daughter had always been perceptive. Of course there is, dear. I want to give your brother a chance to be a better man, to become the man I know he could be. If he can learn to care for others not for profit but truly, it will be the best legacy I can leave him. Beatrice nodded thoughtfully. And if he can't? I shrugged. Then at least I'll know I tried, and my fortune will go to those who truly deserve it. When everyone had gone, Evelyn and I were alone in the living room. She still looked shocked. $500,000, Eloise. That's too much. I was just doing my job. You did much more than that, I said softly. You gave me back my faith in people. Showed me that there are still people out there who don't care out of self-interest. And trust me, this money is the least I can do to thank you. Evelyn shook her head, but there was a deep gratitude in her eyes. What now? She asked. Do you think your son will change? I looked out the window at the snow-covered garden, at the bare branches of the trees waiting for spring to return. I don't know, I answered honestly. But now the ball is in his court. I've given him a chance, a choice. The rest is up to him. I smiled, feeling strangely peaceful. For the first time in years, I was absolutely sure of my decision. Let this be my last entertainment, watching my loved ones show their true nature. Some might surprise me for the better. Some would confirm my worst fears. But most importantly, I was now in control and could see people for who they really were. And that was worth more than any inheritance.